Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. As you know, there is 1 day left, maybe a day and a half. 1 day left of the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival poster contest. That's right. We just have to have the entries by 11:59 tomorrow night, Pacific Daylight Time. 11:59 and I guess 59 seconds. And the contest is over. We are approaching 100 entries. If you have something that you'd like to enter, you've got a day left. It's pretty exciting. I'm hoping you all will. Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and your chancellor of cheerfulness. Lest we forget, your pharaoh of physical media, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett on this debate day, September 29th. This is episode 524 of ROBSERVATIONS. My God, I thought my age would begin to get to me when I said it aloud, but 524 episodes. That's all thanks to you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members that make up this, the post-geek singularity community. Very exciting stuff going on. I have to tell you, I'm kind of a little embarrassed, to be honest. I keep getting, over the last month, there have people, heavy hitters, industry heavy hitters who shall remain nameless, who have contacted me for various reasons. And they all tell me they watch this show, which, well, first of all, terrifies me. But also, on the other hand, it's gratifying to know that people are watching. I guess during a pandemic when production is still shut down, I should feel flattered. I mean, I'm not the only person they watch, obviously. But people have actually chimed in with mostly helpful, either helpful criticisms or commentary or suggestions, and I just want to throw it out to those people. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you writing in, and some people have offered some, I would call it tough love, constructive criticism, and I want to thank you for that. Other people are just fans. I thank you for that too, and that's very much appreciated. And if you want to voice those out loud, please write a letter as well. I'd love to get some of the people that have contacted me to write letters to the show, because that would be dope. Anyway, as you all know, October 1st marks the entries. We're throwing open the doors, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies. That's right, the first annual Imagination Connoisseurs Intergalactic Film Festival. Actually, it's the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival opens for business. We will be accepting entries beginning on October 1st. There will be our rules up on the website. They're not that strict. We're now opening it up to all films. Any films, music videos, whatever you care to share. I mean, I at first I was like, we only want narrative features. I'm like, you know what? Who knows what we're going to get? I don't want to limit anyone's imaginations. I don't want to. If you want to make a documentary about, I don't know, your little sister's American Girl collection that all comes to life when you're not looking, fine. I'm all about that. If you want to make a documentary about your life or the life of a friend or a parent or a loved one, why should we limit you? So this is a very iterative film festival after all. It's whatever we can dream up. And so I encourage any and all films on any level. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of people that have actually asked me, well, Rob, you know people in the industry. What if we get people, Here's the thing. Everybody, I think all of the judges understand that you might have made the slickest movie in the world. It might look totally professional, but that doesn't necessarily mean the content's going to grab and tug at the heartstrings. Remember I told you that story about how my dad and I would always do the Pinewood Derby when I was in Cub Scouts, and because we were in Seattle, there was always some Boeing engineer and his kid that would beat us, and my dad would say, Well, he would apologize to me. My dad was vice president of an insurance company. What did he know about making, aerodynamic cars out of wood? Not much, but we did it anyway, and we had a really good time. The point of this festival is to have a really good time. Now, I know we're going to be giving awards out, because that's what you have to do. I don't believe in every kid gets a trophy. Just like, having this poster contest. I wish everybody who submitted could get an award. But hey, I'm not voting on the posters. You are. So you're going to bestow upon our lucky winners. And I think ultimately we're probably going to have multiple winners. But it's getting pretty interesting. I just want everyone to know I'm opening it up to whomever. Whatever you want to submit, we will play it within reason. R-rated NC-17. If you send me some porn, I'll watch it. I have no problem. And I don't care what kind of porn it is. Straight, gay, I'll watch it all. Name it. No, you know what? Forget I went down that road. Forget it. Just no porn. I'm not going to make jokes about it. No porn. Can't do that. You can go to Dan Savage's Hump Film Festival in Seattle. They actually really do have a amateur porn film festival in Seattle. It's called Hump. You can go to thestranger.com and find out about that if that's what you want to do. But no, basically, it's got to be R-rated because it is going on YouTube. We want to have it be we want to have this festival be conducive. We don't want necessarily, again, I don't want to limit anyone's imagination, but remember, you're making this film for an audience, and we'll see. But I do reserve the right to, if there's something I've deemed like wholly offensive, that we won't play. I can only, go so far. But I don't think anybody's going to. No one sent me any offensive posters yet, so I would assume it's all going to be good. So we're letting, everybody in. And now remember, I haven't decided yet. I don't know how many entries we're going to get, to be honest. And it's hard to judge if, I would assume at this point, because it's the first year of the festival. By the way, just so you know, if I'm schwitzing, it's because it's 100 degrees in here. It's very, very hot outside today. But the air is clear, so that's good. For the most part, I would imagine everybody would get into the film festival. I hope. It depends how many entries we get, really. So we'll see. You'll see on the forums on the October 1st, which is Thursday. So that should be all exciting. Chris Leah, I believe it's Chris Leah, sent in a few poster entries, which I thought were pretty nice. Now, I hope, Chris, that this artwork, you didn't steal it from somewhere. Is it yours? Because if it came from somewhere else, unless it's clip art, it's going to be tough. But these are really cool. I really enjoyed these. They're very interesting, so thanks for those. Here's another one. These two. And then, of course, I got an ad. We are, in fact, going to have trophies. I don't quite know exactly what they're going to be yet. We're still designing them. But we are going to be having something, along those lines. I like the idea of an ad being a monolith from 2001. It might be a little too boring. I don't know if people will get it. I think if we do that, we're probably going to have like a figure of an ape touching it or something. But then again, I don't want to run afoul of the Kubrick estate, but I think that something like that is cool. We will be having trophies and cash prizes. So all of that is very, very exciting. So today, as you know, from yesterday, I had literally a tsunami, a deluge, a flood of letters from people, and I didn't get through them. So there's a lot from yesterday. There's more today, a ton of them. But as I was prepping this show, and I was looking for subjects. Obviously, there's not a lot of subjects to talk about. I wasn't on the John Campy's show. Sometimes John calls me up and goes, look, I just don't have, there's nothing really to talk about, so rather than waste your time, I'm just going to do like an open mic. So he did that to me last night. I'm like, that's cool. And I always know that there's a possibility of that. And indeed, I was looking around for stuff to talk about today. Not really great subjects to discuss, but I did come across this article, which I thought I would share. First of all, before I read it to you, let me get it better so you can actually see it. This was in the Washington Post. I know people are going to be like, oh, I look around. I look at every place. I go to the Drudge Report. I go to the BBC. I go to CNN. I go to everywhere to look for articles. I do. But yes, Washington Post, be prepared to say goodbye to movie theaters. This is an op-ed piece written by Megan McArdle today. It was published today at 5 a.m. No one warned me when I married a movie critic I'd almost never see a movie in the theater again. My spouse, you see, would have already attended the screening, which would take place at 10 in the morning or forbid guests or happen an hour away in the suburbs. The other thing that no one warned me about, understandably, is that during a pandemic, I would be watching my beloved cinephile endure first withdrawal and then intense grief at the sudden cessation of one of his most loved activities. Man, I was reading this and it totally hit me hard. I haven't been in a movie theater. I mean, yes, we did go to see New Mutants at the drive-in. We went to the New Mutants experience at the Rose Bowl, which was actually pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. I wish I enjoyed the movie a little bit more. Mr. Boone, I'm pulling for him because, man, he's directing The Stand. And for those of you, you might know, The Stand's one of my favorite books I've ever read. Don't fuck it up. And I have a lot of affection for Mick Garris's miniseries, even though it was low budget and the first episode's probably the best, but still, a lot of love for it. I mean, many of you know that for years, my friends Gary and Edmund Enton and their father Alvin and mother Lois and brother Seth, we used to play Cast the Stand. We'd get together when Lois and Alvin were in town. We would go to the smokehouse for dinner, and half that dinner was taken up with our game Cast the Stand, meaning who would we cast in various roles in the Stand miniseries or the Stand movie that they were going to make. And of course, well, that was curtailed when CBS All Access announced that they are indeed making the Stand. So I have to say, one of my most eagerly awaited pieces of entertainment this year is the adaptation of the Stand, and I'm only hoping there's a couple of things I'll tell you right off the bat. There better be a really good rendition of Baby, You Gotta Dig Your... Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? Dig Your Man. Can You Dig Your Man? I mean, Baby, Can You Dig Your Man is a really important part of The Stand. And if you don't know what that is, you should read the book or wait, and perhaps you'll hear it. It is Larry Underwood, one of the characters, Larry Underwood's hit song. Now, Mick Garris's miniseries did give us a version of Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? And you can hear it on YouTube. I wasn't down with it. I was hoping it'd be a little bit more kind of smoky and funky or whatever, but hopefully we'll see. I think they're going to nail it this time, but it's a big, isn't it weird that one of the things I'm most eagerly awaiting is this year is to hear a fictional song? I mean, anybody who's read The Stand, Baby, Can You Dig Your Man is a big deal. So, I mean, if they don't give us that, I mean, there's going to be hell to pay. I expect a good version of Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? And by the way, if they were really cool, they would release that song in the whole song. Hopefully it was recorded. They should put it out on Spotify as a promotion for the movie. Because anybody who's read the book, everybody who knows The Stand, knows what Baby, Can You Dig Your Man is. And they should release it, and it should be great. So we'll see. Very excited to see it. Anyway, so I haven't been to a movie in the theater. Since February, I have not driven to see Tenet. Elizabeth is still very paranoid about going into the movie theaters, and I can't blame her for that. But I certainly want to go. I haven't seen Tenet yet, and people are telling me it's coming out on physical media, 4K in December. Oh, well. Anyway, so I've paid close attention as studios groped for a pandemic strategy, and now as studio after studio announces that they're pushing major new releases back, some well into 2021, it's becoming increasingly likely that Americans won't see any more blockbuster movies anywhere until most of the population has been vaccinated. Well, there are certain things that are kind of that's true, but what I love about certain things is people are sending me their movies. I'm going to have the director of this movie, The Wretched, one of the top grossing films this summer, on the show coming up as a live guest. Looking forward to that. So we are getting great physical media. Physical media they've been crushing it, whether you're getting 4K versions of Vertigo. I mean, the physical media is off the charts. Dawn of the Dead's finally going to be shipping, that beautiful, beautiful box set. But anyway, it's becoming increasingly likely that Americans won't see any more blockbuster movies anywhere until most of the population has been vaccinated. Early on, two outcomes seem possible: that COVID-19 might accelerate the already underway shift toward video on demand, and that studio films might release on schedule to our televisions while most theaters close for good. Disney's decision to release Mulan as a $30 add-on purchase for subscribers to its new Disney Plus streaming service looked like it might be the first domino that would topple all of the other blockbusters into a straight-to-video world. But it also seemed possible that, with bars and music venues closed, COVID-19 might bring us back to the future, to an old-fashioned kind of movie watching where movies open to smaller audiences, then played in theaters longer, earning back their investment over weeks and months. The release of Christopher Nolan's time-bending thriller Tenet was a bet on that second proposition. It didn't work. Didn't work. Now that studios are announcing yet more delays for major franchise films such as Black Widow and Wonder Woman 1984, it looks as if both of these theories were wrong. Instead, studios are going to hit the pause button and hope that when this cruel pandemic is over, they can go back to business as usual. That was probably their only remaining option. Tenet deeply underperformed in the United States, and though it did better in the foreign territories where it played, it looks increasingly unlikely to hit the minimum $400 million in global box office it would need to earn back its investment. With the U.S. epidemic still grinding on, indeed, its cases are going up, who wants to gamble $200 million plus investment on having better luck than Christopher Nolan? Nobody. As for video on demand, while Disney has been cagey with numbers, it seems reasonable to infer that if Mulan had made anything approaching traditional blockbuster profits, it would be pushing other movies out on streaming rather than moving Black Widow back to May 2021 and the rest of the Marvel Comics slate sometime after. However, we should assume that whatever the studios write on the calendar, the actual release date of any major motion picture is not a day but a hope when the pandemic is over. That's the only point at which they can be sure of making their money back. And given resurgent outbreaks in already hard-hit cities and communities, it still looks as if over will probably come through mass vaccination, not natural herd immunity. I don't mean to be depressing, but there's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus. Why they think they're going to get a vaccine for this one, I mean, I hope they will. That's good, but don't know what to say about that. Which leaves us with two open questions. First, how long will it take to get enough people vaccinated so that we can once again blithely sit down in the dark with a bunch of strangers who are probably pulling down their masks to munch popcorn? In the United States, at least, the numbers keep getting more discouraging. Fewer than 40% of Americans say they'll get a vaccine when it's available, a decline that seems to be driven by partisan fear as much as medical uncertainty. The longer it takes, the more urgent becomes the second question. Will theaters still be around when viewers are ready to go back? Theater chains are already facing a debt crisis that will become dire if they have to go another year without any significant revenue, as are the shopping malls where many of those theaters are housed. The modern movie business has been turned to operate at a vast scale, opening mega-budget blockbusters on thousands of screens at once. It's unclear what happens if a significant portion of that capacity simply vanishes in the course of a year or two. A lot of things are closing, sometimes for good. I heard Sizzler. Not that, as I get older and have my one foot in the grave, do I go to Sizzler much. But you know what? Every couple of years, already the Soup Plantation, that's gone, right? And Sizzler's disappearing. I mean, maybe these things will all come back, but, I mean, living in L.A., all you do is see everything you love close. I mean, the Coach and Horses is gone. Cat and the Fiddle's gone. Lola's is gone. These are all bars. Timmy Nolan's was taken from us. It's depressing, man. Depressing. Yet even these financial problems are probably secondary to the behavioral one. If it takes 18 months or even longer for enough Americans to get vaccinated, could Americans simply lose the habit of going to the movies, learning to get their video entertainment from streaming series, and their socializing from the backyard? Any one of these changes, financial or behavioral, would utterly upend the movie industry as we know it. But put the two together, and we have to at least consider the possibility that many Americans like me will almost never see a movie in the theater again. Now, I don't mean to make this like the most depressing thing in the world, but it is a very real possibility. And as we all know, studios want to, physical media is already dying, and studios they would much rather, I think, not release movies in theaters if they didn't have to. Now, the thing is, when you're making movies that cost $200 million, a theatrical run is pretty much key to a movie studio. But what's interesting is Netflix, they announced they're making a $200 million action movie with the Russo brothers. Now, I don't really understand the economics behind that. I mean, I honestly don't understand how there are certain shows on Netflix that they'll cancel after one season or two seasons, and yet they'll make a $200 million movie. Because the thing is, on Netflix, to me, it's the great democratizer of content. You look at stuff on Netflix. Now, sure, we don't get their analytics, and I'm sure there's so much stuff on Netflix that might get a few views as opposed to, say, hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of views. So there's a lot. I'm sure there's a huge disparity between the most watched show on Netflix and the most unloved show on Netflix. A huge disparity. But they all look the same when you're clicking through. You don't know. You don't know which show is more successful than the other. It's all just kind of the same content. I mean, Netflix to me is the great democratizer, and unless you look at like the top 10 things that are trending, which I've loved that Netflix is putting these things there. It bummed me out, man. I hark back to, and I don't remember when he said this, but during the dawn of the home video era, when I started working in video stores when I was 13, I always remember that article I read somewhere, and I don't know where it was. Maybe it was in Starlog, maybe it was in like Time magazine, but Kubrick, I have Kubrick on the brain. Steven Spielberg said that the blood, sweat, and tears that he put into making Close Encounters, to see that fit in a cassette that fit in the palm of his hand, was more than a little disconcerting. That's not an exact quote, but the gist of it was, he didn't like it. And back in the day, people forget about this. I mean, a lot of you who maybe are watching this weren't even born yet, but during the early 80s, when home video was exploding, everybody thought that movies were going to go away. The theatrical experience was going to go away, that people wouldn't want to go to the movie theaters anymore. Well, I could tell you, and I was saying this to anybody who would listen, I thought just the opposite was true. Because for me, as a burgeoning movie fan and movie scholar, home video allowed me to watch movies over and over. It allowed me to tape movies off television, late night TV that my parents wouldn't let me stay up and watch, so suddenly I could get my hands on those things. It allowed people to really start studying movies, and not only that, it made people more of a fan of films. I think people started going to the movies more. Now, I don't have any data, but home video, to me, in my mind, what it did was it turned everybody into movie fanatics, and I think that was a pretty cool thing to have happen. I mean, everybody became a movie nut, and that's what home video did. And now we're facing a situation in this pandemic where, look, I don't want, one of the great pleasures in my life, because I'm a movie fanatic, is going to the theater. I love the ritual of it. I love sitting there, but most of all, I love seeing the imagery on a big screen with a loud sound system. I mean, I've banged on and on about how the last time I saw Blade Runner 2049 in IMAX, I was there in the theater almost by myself on a Tuesday afternoon on Hollywood Boulevard at the Chinese. It was it was a religious experience because the volume was so loud, the laser projection is so sharp, and the sound mix of that movie. I mean, I understand it's a particular kind of film, but that's one of the best sound mixes I have ever heard in my life. And hearing it, it was just astonishing. And you could never, even with the best home theater system, and I've seen some pretty incredible home theater systems here in LA, you would be hard pressed to recreate the experience of seeing Blade Runner 2049 in IMAX at the Chinese theater, unless you went to an IMAX screen that was bigger, but the sound was it was truly outstanding. So I'm really pulling for movie theaters. I hope that they're going to stick around, but I don't know. I honestly don't. I don't know. The whole thing makes me sad. But I hope we get them back. Now, I'm going to start today with a long-time imagination connoisseur. Uh-oh, see, people are calling me. I hate when I forget to turn my phone off and it connects to my computer. But I have a great letter from Vesna, our what would you call her? Our lady in Sarajevo. Definitely a foundational member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Vesna Lukic, who has written me a letter. Hello, Robert, and all the members of our little community. I have a confession to make. I don't know if your opinion about me would change after this. I don't think it could. But I've heard that it's good to your soul to admit one's sins. So here it is. I like the Hobbit movies. and I like them more than the book itself. There. Now, that burden is off my chest, and I'm going to explain why. I know they have some issues, and know that love triangle is not one of them, but it's mostly based on a visual aspect, color palette, and the damn 3D. And that was the only way I could watch all three movies in the theater, because, unlike many others, those never had an option of 2D. I agree they're not even close to the Lord of the Rings movies, quality-wise. I think that everybody can agree with that, even those who really love the Hobbit movies more than Lord of the Rings. And yes, there are people like that, just like there are people who like the prequels more than the original Star Wars. Even the worst of them all, Attack of the Clones. By the way, I'm an Attack of the Clones apologist, supporter, whatever. I like Attack of the Clones quite a bit, actually. I like Attack of the Clones a lot better than I like The Force Awakens. I know, maybe a lot of you are going to unsubscribe or write me off on that one, but change my mind. Many of the problems that Hobbit movies have is based on production, primarily MGM, because they greenlit the production even before the adaptation of the book was solved, so the production got stopped for a long time, which led to losing Guillermo del Toro and one of the main actors. But all of this is very well known. Personally, I don't know if I would like this version of Thranduil, although I don't know if I would like his version of Thranduil, though I love most of his movies, but I think his Middle-earth would be too weird, even for me. And I like weird stuff. Oh, we know, Vesna. Talking about weird stuff, having sex with a fish is a little bit different than woman-elf and man-dwarf relationship. Just saying. And I think dwarf men are more attractive than dwarf women because of the beard. But I guess that's up to personal taste. But I digress. Back to the difference between the book and the movies. Most people said that's the main reason why they didn't like the movies is because it's more Thorin's story than Bilbo's, and I agree. But it's like that in the book also. It's because of the dwarves' quest that Bilbo left his home. And speaking of leaving his home, in the book, even that wasn't his decision. He was made to by Gandalf, literally pushed out the door. He was also useless in the battle with the trolls. Gandalf was the only one who procrastinated them until dawn, and the things he actually did in the book, he also did in the movies. So the critique that he was the secondary character in the movies, unlike in the books, is not valid. The thing I really didn't like in the book are dwarves. They all look the same, and I mean totally the same. Same beard, same build, same character. The only difference was the color of their hats and the instrument they played. So if, by any chance, in the battle they lose the hat or, God forbid, the instrument because they're very valuable during the fight, you would know which is which. Only Bombur looked different, and the only difference is being fat and slow. In the book, none of them was a warrior. They were musicians. Maybe that's why I never could remember their names. Just like I couldn't remember the names of the 7 dwarves, and they at least had different characters. No wonder Snow White could live with all 7 of them. That was actually like living with only one of them just when you're drunk. I find it interesting that the part that I most find silly and even made a meme of it, the eagles part, was exactly like in the book, when all of them were on that last tree, except they were attacked by wargs and goblins, not orcs. Although I must admit, I like the look of the wargs more in The Lord of the Rings than in The Hobbit. I've never heard anybody thinking that was the silly part in the book, or maybe just because it was a kid's book, which I don't agree, but we'll get back to that later. So silliness is allowed. And now here comes the best part in the movie. Thranduil, in the book, he looked more like a frog, and I have a feeling Del Toro would make him also look like that, knowing his passion for amphibious creatures. I remember in the theater after the movie, most women said, "Forget Legolas, give me his father," which I could agree with, although I wouldn't mind Legolas too, probably at the same time, knowing you, Vesna. If Snow White could be with 7, I could be with 2, or 3, or 4. Talking about Legolas, it's natural that he'd be in the movie, because at the time, he lived with his father. Now, some of his abilities were over the top, but the way he acted like an arrogant brat, unlike he was in The Lord of the Rings, is also natural. That's why his journey to become humble and a friend with a dwarf is even more important. And as I've said before, I don't mind his relationship with Tauriel, which is a totally fictional character made up for the movie. I love that you say Tauriel's a totally fictional character as opposed to every other character in the book. Because there was never a romantic relationship between the two of them. Yes, he liked her, but she liked somebody else. It's a classic story that everybody can relate to. Most popular and beautiful women often choose some, let's just say, less handsome guys, and Killy was rather handsome for a dwarf. So there never was a threesome in the Hobbit movies, although I find that thought very intriguing. I like interspecies relationships. I know you do. I would add one human in there too, just to be complete. If I would be the one who wrote the script. I wonder how people would react to that foursome. All other things have been said, like Smaug was perfect. I even like more that Bilbo was going straight for the Arkenstone and not take some golden cups first. That would make him just a greedy little bastard. The ending of the second movie was perfect. While in the book, Smaug left the mountain many times, killing cattle and villagers, in the movie, he did it only for the first time in 60 years, so one whole generation thought he was a myth. And when he flew away in the full glory, and when the music cut down, the sound cut down, and Bilbo's line, "What have we done?" which Martin Freeman said magnificently, the sky turned black, and it still gives me chills. I must say I understand why people said that it shouldn't have happened that way, because by the time we watch the third movie, a whole year has passed, so one doesn't have the same attachment to the people in Lake Town, but watching it now back to back, it looks much better. Now, I won't talk much about the third movie because most things that people said with, I agree, meaning this was the first time we actually see Azog in the movie fighting Thorn after 2 years. But again, watching back to back, Thorn's death has an even bigger impact than the time I saw in the theater. And again, that was handled much better than in the book. There, they were all surrounded by other dwarves and elves and even people in the tent. Here, the two of them were alone, allowing those actors to give the best performance they could have. Also, the death of Killy and Philly was done much better. In the book, it was just a mention. Oh, and if it was made by Bilbo's point of view, which was also the criticism I've heard from the book purists, we won't have the third movie at all because he was hit by a rock almost immediately as soon as the battle started. So him going to warn Thorn and company was completely made by Jackson. I just regret that the scene of Thorn's funeral was cut off the theatrical release because it was beautiful. The only thing I didn't like was the overuse of CGI, and not in a good way, but I'm sure if all the production went smoothly, like they've been expected to, we would have had much better movies. We could actually see a glimpse of that scene when Gandalf got captured by Bolg. That was the real Bolg we were meant to have, and it was perfect. We should thank MGM for why they didn't. And as a conclusion, I've said I don't agree that The Hobbit is a kid's book. It has death of one of the main characters along with many others. It has war between 5 armies, and I don't think it's a kid's thing. Now in the book, those deaths were not so graphic, and the horror of war is pink-colored, but it's still horror. And not to mention burning people alive by dragonfire. Now that is a kid thing for sure. In the end, that's my only opinion, maybe because I've read The Hobbit after Lord of the Rings as a teenager, and that it's Tolkien's weakest work. Even he went back and rewrote some things after he finished the Lord of the Rings book, so until next time, we'd have some disagreements about some movies, and if your opinion about me wasn't changed that much, stay healthy, happy, and horny. Vesna. Well, Vesna, my high opinion, my very high, the highest opinion of you could never be changed. What a delightful letter. My problem with the Hobbit films, and I do think they're staggering achievements, is the tone of it. And I understand The Hobbit was a kid's book, and the thing about Lord of the Rings, it's the end of all things. If the Fellowship does not succeed, Mordor takes the world. Sauron will take the world. With Sauron at his side, but it's literally the end of the world. It's the apocalypse. If they don't win, evil will blanket the countryside, and the way of life everyone knows is gone. The Hobbit doesn't have that. It doesn't have that overarching sort of end-of-the-world business that's happening. So I understand where you're coming from. But my problem is that the Hobbit movies are just wildly divergent in tone from one minute to the next. And I do think the high frame rate and the colors, there's not as much verisimilitude as there was in the first Lord of the Rings series. The Hobbit there's a lot of wrong physics. I know that's crazy to complain about physics, but the way people and creatures move in The Hobbit, sometimes I'm like, come on, man. Especially in the first movie. That's when I found I had the biggest problem. William La Rochelle writes in and says, hey, Bob. Or actually, he said, Rob. The errant Kubrick article you eviscerated would not have held my attention beyond the use of toxic male or binary, just because I see them as tendrils of the safe space ideology that in practice is at odds with truth and frankness. The good thing about encountering such options, opinions, and stances over the years that we've all been fans of cinema, and that it is a reminder of the randomness of opinion, and when any of us does something creative, we already know that even when the best of the best generate content, it can be dismissed or lambasted by someone with a platform. Maybe the anniversary of The Shining has put Kubrick in the zeitgeist. For the last couple of weeks, Malcolm McDowell was on Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. He had some interesting perspectives on moments with Kubrick. When he was supposed to go to Kubrick's home, he spoke to Ian Holm, who had been involved in a significant preparation for an early version of the Napoleon movie, and when financing did not come together, it was dropped without any communication to Holm. So McDowell was careful to pin Kubrick down as much as possible in any discussions of A Clockwork Orange. Luckily, Holm did end up eventually playing Napoleon in Time Bandits for Gilliam, but this is not mentioned. The word Rashomon comes up in the oral history of any movie recalled by the participants. I keep a journal on any project I do, augmented these days by a blog. But it is remarkable how recollections of events and stated opinions about a movie or body of work may slip from objective to subjective, depending on how a movie or phenomenon is expected to impact viewers' pet issues with society. I just finished watching a 2018 documentary about Pauline Kael, What She Said. I made a point of reading her collections of reviews in college because Tarantino had called her his film school. Even if I disagreed, I would find the process interesting, take what I liked, and leave the rest. I could be infuriated with her over one review and then point to her as an authority to bump up my positive opinions of, say, used cars. Meaning the movie, not used cars. One puzzle I haven't solved for myself is the issue of movies that improve upon further viewings. It is rare that I might have a negative reaction to something and then look at it later again. Woody Allen tells of first not liking 2001 and still not liking it until, I forget, maybe the 5th time, actually thinking it was great. I have written in a previous letter, which may not have made the cut, about recently putting on Star Trek the Motion Picture and liking it for the first time after years of sharing the perspective of, say, Kevin Smith. I didn't get that letter. I would have read it. Or maybe I didn't see it. Douglas Trumbull's first-person cinema approach to Kirk's shuttle and the reveal of the Enterprise are still glory shots, and that part still seems longish, but the rest of the movie now seems to fly by. There's so much content vying for eyeballs that it can be less likely that someone rewatches anything, let alone examines it. I might watch a movie I love well beyond the impact of the story and into examining the punctuation impact of each frame or cut. Maybe Kubrick will endure without having defenders die on his hill, and maybe he does need them in the age of misinformation. I make an effort to dial down my own disgust if someone is dismissive of Spielberg. If I'm evaluating a director, it is their directing, not any particular subject matter, and the Spielberg brand may have been watered down by some of his credits as a producer. I recall 20 years ago passing a church where one drunk joker was on the grounds defiling a statue, and his buddy was hanging on the outer gate saying, "Help, he's pissing on the Virgin Mary." I glanced toward the icon, and sure enough, the other guy was doing just that. I have enough Irish in me that it is for the best Canadians aren't in the habit of carrying guns. I kept on walking, but I was furious. Then the following day, I felt the same surge of ire when someone badmouthed Mark Hamill. So it caused me to dial down my reactions and question how things bind me to back them, as in, something. It's cut off. Relig. Back them as in relig. Bebop boop. William La Rochelle. P.S. Is your poster winner who becomes a judge eligible to enter a film? I only ask because I missed this if it was covered. I thought a lot about that. And my answer is yes. And you know why? Because making a poster and making a good poster is an extra added bump of creativity. And that extra added creativity, that wherewithal, that initiative should be rewarded. So, by taking the initiative and making a poster, and if you decide to enter a film and you're a judge, hey, maybe your film has a one-vote advantage. But I think that it's worth it, especially if you made the effort to make a poster, because that's how life really is. Also, I'm assuming film entries are a different online form than send us the video part of the site. Yes. I did see a 2-minute little thing. I did send in a 2-minute little thing that was not an entry back on the 19th. Oh, I have it. I wouldn't want it mistaken for a festival entry. It was just about directing. So here's something that, William, there's been an idea that I've been tossing around for a long time. I think I've mentioned it on the show before. I was going to do called Action Figure Film School, where I was going to take scenes, and I wasn't going to take scenes from movies that we already know. In terms of how they're shot, I was going to take scenes from movies or screenplays that I liked and restage them and just use the screenplay from something everybody knows as the basis for how would you shoot a scene. Like, for instance, how would you shoot a scene like at the beginning of Reservoir Dogs where everybody's talking, and what if you didn't shoot it like Quentin Tarantino? and I wanted to do that. I just realized that it would require so much work for what I wanted to do, but I'm going to drop an Atomatic. I don't know if you've watched them, but the work that I was doing on the fan film, the Axanar feature fan film, I've dropped these documentaries. There's one that I haven't dropped that's pretty long that explains how we did the Vulcan scene that gets into that, but I used action figures and I shot an animatic using action figures, so that's why I had the idea. This was 5 years ago of doing action figure film school, but William did send us a video on directing that I've been saving for October 1st, but I'm going to play it. So you will see it, William. Yes, you will. This one comes from Jason Webster. Hi, Robert. I hope yourself and all the members of the Post Geek Singularity are enjoying the weekend. I have an interesting question. Instead of making remakes of remakes or remakes of films that are only 10 to 20 years old, wouldn't it be better if they're going to produce remakes to produce movies based on films where the premise sounded great in treatment but didn't translate well on screen, either through production problems, over-budgeted or poor script and execution, or a simple case of being the right film released at the wrong time? That way, they'll be able to give these films a second chance to attain the success they were denied. For example, films like Juggernaut, The Eiger Sanction, The Cassandra Crossing, Raise the Titanic, The Watcher in the Woods, The Fourth Protocol, The Bonfire of the Vanities, Accidental Hero, The Last Action Hero, and Johnny Mnemonic, directed by Robert Longo, among numerous others. With this in mind, what previous film do you believe fits the bill in terms of receiving the opportunity through a remake to be successful that was denied the original upon its theatrical release? Hoping yourself and all the members of the Post Geek Singularity have carefree days or nights, depending on which half of the planet one may reside in. Sincerely, Jason Webster. That's a great, first of all, that is a great list. Although I got to tell you, bruh, I like the Cassandra Crossing. I have that on Blu-ray. Juggernaut and the Eiger Sanction, that's pretty good. Bonfire of the Vanities, you'd have to relicense the book. Last Action Hero, I think it's a really good idea. Remaking movies that weren't necessarily horrible but were compromised. If I could remake any movie right now, I would remake 2010. I would remake 2010 and make it skew or hew closer to the book. Because in the book, it was the Russians and the Americans that teamed up to beat the Chinese to Europa, basically. And I think you could remake 2010. Obviously, you'd have to change the title, but I think you could remake 2010 now and make it more like the book. And I love 2010. It's not 2001, but I love it for what it is. I really do. I really love 2010 a lot. It seems so dated to me because they made the Cold War a big part of the story. And if they had just done what Arthur C. Clarke did in the first place, which was make China the rival, it would have worked better. I mean, I still like a lot of what's in 2010, but I would love to remake 2010, given a choice. And Keir Dulley's still around, so you actually could do that, which I think could be neat. Desmond is here. Desmond says, "Hi, Toy Man. Hope you and your family are well." They are, thank you very much. "I'm wondering if you could share some insight into how studios calculate piracy into their movie projects." Interesting. "I came across some online users talking about how movies like Tenet, Mulan, and more will be pirated heavily. However, they always share subjective opinions and no data to back up their opinions with no context of approximate numbers. It's understandable on some level that there would be piracy for every movie, especially in our current COVID situation. However, it would be useful to understand how studios calculate piracy rates, where they could obtain such data that could give them an indicator of the effect on top-line figures of their properties that have heavy instruments over 200 million, etc. Example, if a movie is 300 million, including marketing, and it is estimated to make at least 700 to 900 million in revenue, what would be a likely percentage threshold studios would leave for piracy? 15 to 30%. Your insights would be appreciated. Kind regards, Desmond." I'll tell you, Desmond, I honestly don't have the answers for that. I'll tell you where piracy really hurts, because I think that big budget studio movies are an experience. Now, sure, if you want to tell your friends, like, look, to be honest, I used to be a video pirate. Back in the 80s, as soon as I could drive, I had a video camera. I would pay a theater owner and I'd pay his projectionist to run a movie, and I would shoot it off the screen. And I prided myself, my bootleg videos were really good. because I recorded in stereo. They were really good. And I paid $75 to the manager and $75% to the $75 to the projectionist, and I could sell those tapes. Believe it or not, we're talking early mid '80s for $150 a pop, and I did quite a brisk business, to be honest. So I was a total video pirate. But nowadays, I don't. Sure, in countries like China and Asian countries, piracy runs rampant. It does. But I think most people now, the movie-going public, are going to see spectacle. You're going to see a theater. You're going to see a movie in a big theater. You're going to see Avengers Endgame. Who wants to watch a shitty bootleg version of Avengers Endgame unless you just want to say you had it? Or like, look at this. Even when I pirated videotapes back in the day, they were all terrible. You know, they were not a replacement for movies. And I think that nowadays when people want to go see these Marvel movies, they don't really want to watch a pirated version. So the movies themselves were, I think, the best defense. Where piracy really hurts is in the independent film market. Like if you're trying to make an independent film, a horror film, and try and pay your investor back, and you made $1 million movie, piracy can kill you. It can kill you because people don't necessarily want to go out and see those movies, so they'll watch pirated copies anyway. So piracy is a huge problem for low budget and indie films. It's a huge problem. Not so much at the studio level, although it is. I mean, piracy runs rampant, but as you can see from last year's Disney numbers, piracy doesn't hurt the MCU at all because people want to see those things in the theater. But low-budget indie features, it's a different story entirely. I don't know the actual numbers, however. There's no way for me to know that. It's a really interesting question. Now you've made me curious. By the way, I'm not saying piracy doesn't happen. It does. You can go buy Tenet in Chinatown. There's all kinds of piracy that's happening, but people, when they know if they really want to see Tenet, they're going to turn out and go see it in the theater. So, yeah. Tom Blair writes in and says, "Hello, Rob. This is my first letter to you in almost a year." What? Essentially, my last letter to you was in response to your observance of September 13th, 1999 as the 20th anniversary of Space 1999, documenting the loss of our moon. I recounted how I'd watched Space 1999 as a young boy and how seeing the show again as an adult both helped me remember some good times watching the show with my mom as well as seeing the show in a new light. So now I find myself writing to you again, this time in response to a recent episode of yours, specifically episode number 517, in which you and Scott Mantz had a long conversation about Star Trek. I find that episode very enjoyable, and it was great to see two guys near my age talk about Star Trek in a way I miss talking. I am a few years younger than you, but I'm not so young to not remember the 70s and seeing both Star Trek, the original series, and the animated series in syndication. That is, even before seeing Star Wars in '79 at a drive-in. In fact, I can say I've seen every single Star Trek movie when they were first in theaters, except for Into Darkness. I know a lot of people like to say something is in their DNA, like being a fan of a sports team is in my DNA. But when it comes to Star Trek, being in my DNA just might possibly be true for me. You see, my mom was a fan of the original series and watched every episode in first run when she was in high school. She was such a fan that she even canceled a date with my dad. My mom and dad were high school sweethearts, and my dad had to learn to accept that my mom was serious about her Star Trek. He had not accepted the absolute truism. Had he not accepted the absolute truism, I might not have ever been. So, as I stated earlier, I grew up in the age of syndication, and I'd watched many episodes with my mom, and even alone after I became a fan of it myself at the ripe old age of 5 years old. As I grew, Star Trek was always there. On through grade school, TOS gave way to the TOS movie era. I built my share of models of the Enterprise and drew countless Federation starships on my spiral notebooks in class. In my high school years, I had TVH and TFF, but more importantly, TNG. At the time, it was met with a less than warm welcome by many, but my mom and I watched every episode of TNG together for 3 seasons. When I graduated high school in May of 1990, that was also within months of the season 3 finale of The Best of Both Worlds. Now, 1990 was also the year I enlisted in the U.S. Army, and I went to basic training that summer, graduating boot camp in time to start my second phase of training called AIT. Advanced Individual Training is the phase of training where enlistees have more freedom and even a TV in the rec room. The summer of 1990 was also the summer that Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, which would lead to the first Gulf War, which we recruits were being trained in a way that assumed we'd be deployed to Saudi Arabia to fight in the first war since Vietnam. at that time. For a newly turned 18-year-old man like me, well, that was sobering. Being in the military, you rarely have time to dwell on things or time to yourself, but I remember one particular evening, with all of us crowded into the rec room to see The Best of Both Worlds Part 2. Not only was it a spectacular conclusion to one of the most important episodes of Star Trek and possibly TV history, but it was not lost on me then, as it is not lost on me now, the significance of that episode on the eve of a real world war. During most of my time in the Army, I watched what I could of TNG and later DS9, but I missed more episodes than not. Also, it just wasn't quite the same watching Star Trek without my mom, which made the franchise all the more enjoyable to me. I didn't stay in the Army, but got out in 1994 to go on to college. That was the same year that the Next Generation series ended and Star Trek Generations was in theaters. 6 months after that, we got Voyager and the TNG films. Sometimes Voyager was a slog, but I still stuck by it, and I'm still a fan of Voyager. I didn't feel so guilty about seeing Voyager while I was working my way through school without my mom, because she never took to Voyager. Now, she did get pulled back into Star Trek with Enterprise, and I did watch the first season with her. That was also during another historical time, 9/11 and its aftermath, and the wars that sadly came with it. I think Enterprise is a show that, despite its failings, is a time capsule of what the U.S. and Western civilization went through during that time. It both reflected the prevailing attitudes as well as characters, like most of us at the time struggled to live up to our ideals. Rob, I also share the frustration that you and many other Roddenberry Berman-era Trek fans have over the Kelvin timeline and post-Discovery TV era. Neither incarnation is true to what I consider the original Star Trek, TOS Enterprise. The Kelvin timeline is easier to ignore because they're just 3 movies so far in an alternate timeline. They don't damage the era of Trek I'm a fan of, and if one considers Discovery another alternate timeline like I do too, same effect. But still, they both could be so much better, and it is infinitely disappointing to me that they aren't. But I can still appreciate them in some ways, like the special effects, but when it comes to writing, like you say, they're gobbledygook. And don't get me started on Picard, the worst offender, but everything that can be said about Picard has been said, so I won't comment further on that folly. Strange New Worlds look like it could be promising, but time will tell. I've been burned before by Star Wars and Star Trek. Anyway, I'm sorry for the long letter. I just want to conclude by saying that Star Trek is a large part of my life, and has literally been in my life all my life. To this day, the original series, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise get annual rewatches on my Blu-rays or DVDs. I have them all on physical media, including the TNG and Enterprise box sets with your interviews. And yes, I still build models too. In fact, I have the fleet of the named, canon or not, 1/1000th Constitution-class ships, along with a few others I made up, sitting on my bookshelf now. In short, Star Trek is as much a part of my life's journey as anything, if not part of my DNA. So whenever you choose to discuss Star Trek, it makes me realize I'm not alone in my appreciation for Star Trek. And that means a lot. Thank you for everything you do, especially keeping the appreciation for classic Trek alive. Sincerely, Tom Blair. What a great letter, Tom. Thanks for writing in. Yeah, I mean, to me, the funny thing is the original series is Star Trek. Everything else is a variation on a theme. And while I do like other Star Trek, to me, when you say Star Trek, the first thing that comes to mind is the original series. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov. I mean, that's the first thing I think of. So I can't help it. I mean, I absolutely can't help it. Ooh, Electron Star Collapse is great. And back. Greetings, Rob, and the Post-Geek Singularity. I had been following the progress of a game project on Steam called Not for Broadcast for a few months now. It's a game that has the player in a control booth for a live news broadcast using real actors filmed on a set. The goal of the game is to perform live-action changes to keep ratings up without losing focus on the action. That sounds cool. And be sure to censor any foul language that comes through before it goes live 2 seconds later. It has a bonkers-style humor set in a fictional version of 1980s Britain as it leads into the strange dystopia after the new government party takes control. I felt compelled to write about this because the game is still in active development. They released the first collective episode of content ready to start filming episode 2, and then the lockdown happened. The independent development studio, Not Games, was faced with the horrible dilemma that they were selling an early access game to new buyers, existing purchasers were eagerly awaiting new content, and hired actors were suddenly in a position where there was significant dangers for them to continue to work as usual. Not Games found a way to continue production while keeping everyone safe. They created bonus broadcasts, which were dream sequences of an already established dangerous toy called Mr. Snugglehug coming to life. That's an interesting solution. Coming together in droves like gremlins and wreaking havoc across the country, forcing people to lock themselves into their homes for their safety. While in some ways I can see it in a bit of poor taste because of real lives at stake with our current reality, I appreciate how dedicated everyone involved is and actively looking for solutions to keep the project alive. I thoroughly enjoy the game and the humor, especially because I've been a fan for years of games which incorporate full motion video of live actors. It became a lost relic of the 90s, but seems to be making a return in the modern day. Many of these games have B-movie appeal, like Night Trap with Dana Plato or Double Switch with Corey Haim. But there are some games that had strong actors cast, such as Wing Commander 3 and 4 with Mark Hamill, Tom Wilson, Malcolm McDowell, and John Rhys-Davies. Ripper with Karen Allen, Christopher Walken, Burgess Meredith, Ozzie Davis, Paul Giamatti, and again, John Rhys-Davies. Or Privateer 2 with Clive Owen, John Hurt, and again, Christopher Walken. There was a lot of dedication to make these games feel like a cinematic experience whenever possible. So when I see a game with live actors rather than just voice actors, I'm always intrigued and I need to take a look. Please don't take it the wrong way. I have a fond appreciation of voice acting when trying to do it myself, given the opportunity. There just is a grand abundance of voice-acted games and a limited supply of games with live actors. Again, I encourage everyone that is an adult that can handle some adult content to take a look at Not for Broadcast. Maybe the small game developer will game your interest like they gained mine, and maybe we can help get them to get live actors back into the studio and make games. Much like Not Games hasn't. Don't let the stars collapse on you. Well, there you go, Electron Star Collapse. I'm with you there. I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing you done that, Anthony. It's a very good thing. So that is a good thing. So let's see what you guys are doing over here. Let's find out, shall we? So Willis here. Willis says, so the entire bridge crew on the Voyager just stood by and watched in silence as an innocent man begs them for his life. And the only one who's brave enough to voice any objections is a hologram. Hashtag justice for Tuvix. Well, that is, of course, a pretty famous or infamous episode of Voyager where Neelix and Tuvok are combined through a transporter accident into a new creature called Tuvix. And it brings about a lot of ethical questions. I mean, should we destroy Tuvix, who's a new creature, because we need to get Neelix and Tuvok back? And I think the answer is yes. You know, they try and it is a very interesting ethical dilemma, but the fact is, if you can change it back, Tuvix isn't supposed to be alive. It's against the natural order of things. It was all caused by technology. So I think they should have gotten rid of Tuvix. And they should have. Eric Gant says, on this day in 1984, Let's Go Crazy, Punch a Higher Floor from Purple Rain reached number 1 on the charts. I was 14 then, and all these years later, I still think the song and album are the jam. Are we going to let the elevator bring us down? Oh, no. Let's go. Let's go crazy. You know what? You know what I got? I finally got this. I'm pretty stoked about this. This is the new Sign of the Times with a big book in it. I did not get the vinyl. These are the CDs. The expanded remastered Prince disc. It's number 2 of their remasters after 1999. Now, while I have not cracked the cellophane because I've been so busy over the last 2 days, it's good to have that. I did not know that today that Let's Go Crazy from Purple Rain reached number 1 on the charts. Eric, that is a good thing. I saw that tour. I love that album. You know what? That album remains timeless. And, you know, I'm a big fan of the 12-inch version of Let's Go Crazy with the piano, the crazy piano part. Dun, 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 dun. I love that. I'm a Prince 12-inch fiend. You got to have all those. And I have most of them now on CD, but I have my old vinyl. So thanks for writing in, and that takes me back. Matt G sends in a super chat. Well, thanks, Matt G. I appreciate that. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, so 200 million blockbusters are out of the question for theaters, but is there any chance that some lower budget titles intended for streaming services could be put into theaters in some locations? I mean, that's an alternative. Taking streaming movies and actually putting them in the theaters. Like, I would have liked to have seen. There's Netflix movies. There's a horror film called The Ritual. I really wish I saw on a big screen. I really like The Ritual. What is it? The Old Guard, the Charlize Theron movie. I would like to have seen that in a theater, on bigger screens. I mean, I would have, and I just would. So maybe, I mean, that's an interesting proposition. But the thing is that streaming services want those movies to drive subscriptions. So if you can go see them in a theater, you don't necessarily, you're not going to necessarily subscribe to Netflix because of that. Brandon Sheehy says, I'm really looking forward to WandaVision. So am I. The trailer gives me vibes of my two favorite movies, Pleasantville and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Brendan, I couldn't agree with you more. I think WandaVision looks bonkers, and I cannot wait to see it. Very excited to see WandaVision. It looks crazy. I have no sense of what they're trying to do, and I love it. Can't wait. R.J. McCready sends in a super chat and says, Rob, you cannot possibly buy John's conspiracy theory regarding Ray Fisher speaking out as a PR stunt. Truly an ignorant stance regarding abuse. I do not. I believe in what Ray Fisher is saying. I mean, look, I think that I can't imagine a worse situation than the situation of making Justice League after Snyder left. The most thankless job in the world. The actors, the crew, I'm sure everybody had a really terrible time, and I don't believe it as a publicity stunt at all. Not in the least. I think it's all true, but I don't think it was because Joss Whedon suddenly turned into a monumental asshole. I think Joss Whedon had more pressure on him than anyone's ever had, probably in the history of Hollywood, to perform. I mean, here they got the guy who directed 2 Avengers movies expecting him to make magic, and he couldn't do it. Because clearly, as we've known, I mean, one of the things that I've always said, people keep throwing back in my face that, Rob, you said the Snyder Cut was never going to happen. Yes, but new information came to light. And I was one of the first people to say, well, now that HBO's around, maybe they'll have an entity that would pay for. My whole thing was, there was never a Snyder Cut. There was never a Snyder Cut the way people thought. There was the Snyder Cut the way movies are made. So when you're making a blockbuster movie, somebody is cutting that film now with previs before they even start shooting. So somebody's cutting all the time. So by the time, and they were 4 months into post-production, of course there was a cut. It wasn't near to be finished. They were going to have to put a shit ton more money into it, but that's how filmmaking works. So when I'm like, there's a finished Snyder Cut. That was all misconstrued. People don't understand. They don't get, and that's when people say, oh, there's a finished version of the movie. No, I'm just happy we're going to get it now, but I can only imagine it must have been the most horrific thing ever to be on that set as a director, because everybody hates you. The cast has worked. They're endeared to Zack Snyder. They don't want to deal with Joss Whedon. So there's going to be instant. Can you imagine every day you're Joss Whedon? Every day you go to work and people are like, okay, sir, what do you want now? I mean, I can only imagine how awful that would have been for him. So I'm sure he got very, very, very prickly. And I don't necessarily think it's because he's an abuser of any kind. But then again, I've never met him. But still, what a thankless task he had. A thankless task. Doolittle's dad says, instead of seeing Black Widow, Eternals, Venom 2, and maybe Wonder Woman 84 this year, we got the mediocre at best Birds of Prey, Bloodshot, and New Mutants. A sad decline given all the great comic book films last year. Another reason to say, fuck 2020. Well, you're not wrong about that. Bunyan Snipe sends in a super chat and says, would you make a film about your time as a pirate? You mean a video pirate? It wasn't that interesting. Although I will say that the guy whose theater I went to was later killed in a robbery. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was just something. It's only worthy of a scene, I think, if I made like a sequel to Free Enterprise and dealt with that as a kid, because I was always I started pirating, I started copying videotapes, and so I did some pretty sketchy. I did some bad shit. Like at the video stores that I would work at, the first tape I did this with, I'll come clean. I'll come clean right now. I stole, like even when you would tape something, it never looked as good as the original. So there were times I used to do this more than I would possibly ever admit. And by the way, my tapes were as good as they could be. I would copy things. I had 4 VCRs daisy chained together. So I'd put a tape in one, I could record it 3 times. And my RCA player beat any kind of Macrovision, so there was never any problem with the tape. And I copied a lot of movies, and then I would pop open the tapes. And that's why, remember the silver tapes that were on, sometimes it'd say "Be Kind, Rewind," but it was so people would know whether you popped open the tapes. That's why they were so hard to take off. And they would know if you cut it down the middle, they would know. So before those silver tapes, pre that silver tape stuff, I would tape a movie. Like the first movie I did it with was Universal's release of Silent Running. I made a copy of Silent Running, and I took the tapes apart, and I took the real version, and I popped in my copy on the tape and put it back on the rental shelf. Nobody would know. Only I would know. So, I mean, I don't know if that's worthy of a movie. I guess I'd need some kind of an adversary, but it wasn't good. I wasn't a very good kid about that stuff. Jeff Yerkey is here, who's entered 2 posters into our poster conversation contest, including this interesting edition, which I really, really like. So check that out. So Jeff says, "Hi, Rob. I'm thinking about films that stick in my post-geek singularity mind. I wanted to know your thoughts on Michael Mann." I'm a huge Michael Mann fan. "While most folks think Miami Vice, I go immediately to such greats as Thief, Manhunter, Collateral, and the legendary Heat." I love Michael Mann. Thief is one of my favorite movies. It's right up there with To Live and Die in L.A. in terms of cop thrillers. I love Thief, I love Manhunter, Collateral, and the legendary Heat. I would also throw into that Last of the Mohicans. I'm a huge fan of Last of the Mohicans. I think it's really great. I love Michael Mann. I love him. Love, love, love. I hope he gets to make another movie someday. I really do. This letter comes from Pedro Ferreira. It's Ferreira. I think it's just Pedro Ferreira. Pedro, you know I always get your last name wrong, and I apologize. Ferreira, I think it's Ferreira, right? Ferreira. "Hi, Rob. Quick letter. As perhaps I wasn't clear in my last letter, Rob. I don't feel I got across what I was trying to say, and that was my mistake. To clarify what I meant, I suppose this is timely after what happened a couple of days ago with the Kubrick article. What about if I thought something was objectively good based on my own reasoning, but it went against the consensus that it wasn't? Does that make me wrong? No, I would say that your idea of what something is, if something is objectively good or not, is your subjective opinion. So, but we'll see. We'll see what you're going to say. For example, I wouldn't say Kubrick is a hack for the same poor reasoning John Mendelsohn gave, but what if I thought the same yet gave objective examples of why? You're going to give objective examples of why Kubrick is a hack? On this show? Does it mean I'm wrong because I challenged general consensus that thought the opposite? Well, Pedro, it does. And I'm here to tell you, you cannot disparage my main man, Stanley Kubrick. You cannot. You cannot. If you don't like his films, well, let's just face it, you're wrong. I don't feel any type of media or art is above criticism. Even what we see as classic movies like Citizen Kane are not above criticism. Chances are, regardless if I'm talking about a classic or something critically panned, it's possible to find problems with it. Even The Empire Strikes Back can be seen as having issues. I obviously don't want to incur your wrath, Rob. Oh, you already did. You're on my list. But I don't feel it's unfair to criticize work of genius directors like Kubrick. John Mendelsohn was fine to critique Kubrick's works, but he did it for the wrong reasons. He held up Kubrick as the problem, not his work. And that was where Mendelsohn went off the rails. He could have criticized the writing, Kubrick's use of camera angles, the cinematography, or the music. Instead, he did a character assassination without providing any evidence to back up his claims. Therefore, I'm sorry, I was getting a message in the middle of that. He could have criticized the writing, Kubrick's use of camera angles, the cinematography, or the music. Instead, he did a character assassination without providing any evidence to back up his claims. Therefore, his article felt completely subjective and not the least objective. Interestingly, The Usual Suspects is seen as a masterpiece of filmmaking, yet not everybody likes it, not the least of which is Roger Ebert, who couldn't see what all the fuss was about. Fight Club is well regarded by connoisseurs, yet after studying it in some classes, I find it objectively a bad movie. Well, that's interesting. I'd like to hear why. You talked about how a consensus of what some well-regarded means. You talked about how a consensus of what some well-regarded means something is generally good. Well, Rob, that line of thinking doesn't quite work, as the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot movie unanimously got a 4 to 5 to 5-star reviews by critics. The only person who didn't like the movie, Richard Roper, got criticized, and he's part of the problem since he wasn't giving clear reasons why it was a bad movie. But let's take the consensus of that movie. By your logic, I take their word as gospel since they're top critics. Now, I'm aware that's an example that won't hold value over time like Citizen Kane, but it's worth thinking whether those who are respected critics can be trusted. My point is this. We shouldn't be afraid to question consensus. I guess as someone who has always never hopped on bandwagons, I've always fought stubbornly for my opinion on media, but I've always backed it up with some objective reasoning, even if I've been on the contrary side of most things. I hope, Rob, you don't mind my letter so soon after the last one. Of course not. You can write me every day if you want. I have people who do, and you know who you are. I just wish to expand on what I said. I hope my letters aren't too annoying to read. Not at all. But I just feel as an imagination connoisseur, I would not be doing myself due diligence in not questioning the general consensus. Kind regards, Pedro. Well, you know, I agree with you, Pedro. I mean, I think, look, I don't think whether a movie is objectively good or bad can be decided right when it comes out. A movie has to be considered by all the movie-going population that sees it. And I don't necessarily think, like, you can think a movie is great right now, but is it going to transcend the time that it was in? I think that's really the only way you can tell. You need, how much time do you need? Well, I give it the same as pop culture, say 20 years. You know, when The Shawshank Redemption came out, based on one of my favorite pieces of Stephen King's writing, the story Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption, that was first published in 1982 in different seasons. I love that film, but it took like how long before people recognized it as being a great movie, and it didn't make a lot of money. It was considered a disappointment. So, kind of a bummer. So I think history is a big part of deciding whether or not something is great. Now, I think I personally, because I've been spending my life studying film, I mean, I can look at a movie and tell you whether, I'll give you an example. And I'm not saying like I'm the Oracle at Delphi, that I know everything. But I will say that for the most part, I'm pretty good when it comes to recognizing the greatness in a film. Like, for instance, when I saw Unforgiven's the last example. I think it was 1992, and I also saw that in the Chinese theater before it was converted to an IMAX theater. I was blown away by Unforgiven. I was blown away by it. I watched it and I was like, wow. And when I'm watching a movie, it's not really about my personal opinion. I literally try and look for objectively if a movie is great or not. Does it work on its own merits? And I know that might seem strange because they're like, well, Rob, that's only your opinion, man. Yes, but I'm trying. When I'm forming my opinion and watching movies, I'm sort of like getting rid of me, and I'm trying to experience the movie the way it is. And I think that is, you can tell. And when I saw Unforgiven, I'm like, I even said, I was with my friend Wayne Mogilevsky. I turned to Wayne and I'm like, that's going to win Best Picture. I just knew it. Like, when I saw it, I was like, that's going to win Best Picture. And indeed it did. And I think that's just because the way I watch films, to be honest. And, I mean, you can tell. I honestly believe that you can tell. I believe there is an objectiveness to whether or not movies are great or not. I really do believe that. I honestly believe that. Omar94 is here. Omar says, "Hi, Rob. You once said entertainment is a product of its time. It is. I say it all the time. And this got me thinking about if some movies and TV shows of the past would work if they were made today. Let's look at television first. All in the Family and The Mary Tyler Moore Show are shows that came out in the 1970s. As much as I like both shows, I'm mixed on whether it would work if it was made today. Obviously, there are changes in technology, fashion, and dialogue since those always change, but I'm not sure if a TV studio would make shows like that today. The same goes for movies. I don't know if a lot of iconic movies would get made today, and have the same impact on the industry and pop culture like they did back when they were released, like Godfather 1 and 2, Apocalypse Now, Chinatown, Jaws, Close Encounters, E.T., Rocky, Grease, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, the first 3 Indiana Jones movies, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future, When Harry Met Sally, Die Hard 1 and 3, Terminator 2, 1 and 2, Jurassic Park, RoboCop, Alien and Alien, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, Matrix, and many others. I know a lot of movies and TV shows still hold up, but I don't know whether they would work if made today as opposed to when they first came out. Thanks and live long and prosper." Well, Omar, I think this is a great letter. It's a great point. And like I've always said, pop culture lasts about 20 years, and then things start slipping into obscurity. I really honestly believe that. I really do, 100%, that it's a 20-year period of time, and then it kind of falls off. And I think a lot of things are products. I really do believe that our culture has become, we're slightly devolved from where we were in the 70s. In terms of grappling with social issues and things like that. I mean, there would be people that would listen to Carol O'Connor's Archie Bunker and be triggered. Certainly in academia, there would be college students that would freak out listening to what Archie Bunker said on TV to all of America. Archie Bunker played, if no one's ever seen All in the Family, Rob Reiner, the film director, Sally Struthers, and Carol O'Connor played Archie Bunker, and why am I drawing a blank? Jean, why am I drawing a blank? Edith Bunker was played by Jean Stapleton, and she was amazing, the beleaguered wife of a bigot, and I don't think you could make that show today. And I think that there's, if you read Jonathan Haidt's book, Coddling of the American Mind, I think that we live in a society now, we live in a culture where there's a lot of people that if they hear something that makes them uncomfortable, they lash out. Like, you talk about the snowflake generation or whatever. The whole thing about Archie Bunker and the whole thing about All in the Family was it was meant to be confrontational. It was meant to be really confrontational to all Americans and to talk about things like race and where we were at as a culture. That I don't think people would stand for it now. They would freak out. They can't deal with that kind of and in the guise of entertainment. So I do think that entertainment, since you brought up All in the Family and the Mary Tyler Moore Show, I mean, the Mary Tyler Moore Show wasn't as offensive in terms of what it was doing, but there was a maturity level where people were not so quick to lash out. They could listen. It's very interesting to me to see how quickly people lash out at other people that say things in a big way. I mean, I don't understand. Like, I guess because I've read so much and watched many things, I don't really get offended when people say stuff. I mean, I think it's offensive. I think I don't like. I don't like when people are treated. I guess what I don't understand is like the people that exist on this planet are here. So I've never really understood, like I didn't understand that there was racism until later, like when I was like, 9 or 10 years old. I just didn't get it. I didn't understand because to me, things were just matter of fact. Like my first crush, I've talked about it on the show, was Nichelle Nichols. And when she exposed her midriff in Mirror Mirror, I was like all about that. I didn't understand. Like if you were to ask me at 6 or 7 years old and try and explain to me that there are people in America that didn't like black people, I would have been very hard pressed to understand why that was, because I love Lieutenant Uhura. And in my mind, it's not like there was a choice. Lieutenant Uhura was just a gorgeous specimen, a beautiful woman that happened to have darker skin. Like, she was on the Enterprise. It was the future. It was like, okay, I know that I wanted to get with Lieutenant Uhura, let me tell you. I mean, she was one beautiful lady. And she was cool. She was cool. I liked her. And I remember that I've told this story before on the show, but the first time that I encountered racism, when I heard somebody actually utter the N-word, and I was like, it didn't, when I heard it and somebody started saying these things, I'm like, wait a minute, are you telling me that you wouldn't want to see Lieutenant Uhura naked? Is that what you're saying to me? Even though I was probably 9 or 10. I mean, why would the answer to that be no, I would not? Like, wait a minute, because there was no other Lieutenant Uhura. I mean, I like what I got. But the racism and the stuff that was on display in those shows, it was confrontational. It was dealing with it in a very, nowadays you can't have those conversations. You can't even say things without people coming after you. It's crazy. And it's a weird thing. So I think everything is a product of its time. And I think when you're watching things that are products of their time, you need to approach them as if you are watching them from the time at which it was made. Because if you're trying to impose our modern values on something, it doesn't work. Because our values weren't there. They were different. You should look at things and be like, that was really interesting. They let that go. And people don't. They don't. It's weird. But yes, I do think it's a product. Things are a product of their time. I think our entertainment has become, growing up loving movies of the 70s, you're watching things like Tarkovsky, or you're watching, which I love, but like All the President's Men, or Network, for instance. Network might still work because it's a savage satire, but you look at some of those things, movies of the 70s to me seem so much more adult. And they dealt with so many more adult things. Now, a lot of our entertainment, at least theatrically, it's been very much infantilized. There's a lot of great stuff going on television. There's a lot of craziness, but I just feel like, popular entertainment has sort of devolved a bit. So is like popular music as well. But yeah, things are products of their time. And like you say, I know a lot of movies and TV shows still hold up, but I don't know whether they would work if made today. I don't think a lot of them would, because audiences are looking for different things now. We want spectacle. Could a movie like Network be a hit? I don't know. Interesting, but a good letter. A good letter. Let's see. Colin Wright. Oh. This is from Colin. Hello, Rob. I watched Michelangelo Antonioni's trilogy, La Ventura, La Notte, and L'Eclipse. First, I have to thank you for the recommendation. This is the second time I've watched the films since you mentioned them. If you would like or feel that viewers would be interested, I'm happy to write an in-depth review. Oh, I would love to read an in-depth review of yours. But I worry it isn't for everyone and might bore viewers. Oh, I guarantee you it will. It's not for everyone and it'll probably bore viewers, but I would love it. I will spoil it and say that I love them. I loved how different they were than what I see in film. The unblinking look at not just men and women, but human nature. What a great experience. First, I know that you have various dream projects you've been working to get made for years, but do you have something like an ennui trilogy in you? Do you want to make films like that? Ooh, what a great question. Second, I've heard names on the Criterion Closet videos like Ozu and Cassavetes. I've already watched some Cassavetes and thoroughly enjoyed it. I have the Criterion Cassavetes box set right over there. And recommendations like Bicycle Thieves, but I figured since you started broadening my film education, perhaps you'd be kind enough to continue and give me another great filmmaker recommendation. I would very much appreciate it. Third, who do you think is doing great film criticism these days? I'll close by thanking you again for Antonioni. I'm not exaggerating when I say these movies have rekindled my love for film. And I was still enjoying movies, but also seeing a lot of the same, and I didn't realize how much I craved something different. One of my favorite things about your show is how informed you are and how you do consider film important. It's to all of your viewers' benefit. Thanks again. Well, Colin, way to butter me up. You should You should make a movie for the first. No, I can't say that. I don't want to compromise the voting. But no, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Well, God, there's so much to unpack here. Movies, to me, are very different now than they used to be. And I feel that way, too, about, like, I was talking with Elizabeth about this yesterday. Pop music, for instance. I can barely listen to pop music today. Now, there's a lot of great music being made all over the place. Many artists, the internet has exploded. You can find artists. But in terms of, like, when I was growing up, it was like when Purple Rain came out. When I would buy music, there was all kinds of crazy bands, wide varieties of music that you could listen to. All kinds of music. And I liked it all. I liked all kinds of music. And a lot of it was really, really interesting. I mean, I go back and I look at, I probably have, I don't know. I'm looking around. There's probably 1,000 CDs over there. 1,500, 1,000. That's what I have left. It's mostly soundtracks, but I kept a lot of my 80s CDs. And I collect, like, when I can't get enough of 12-inch dance remixes from the 80s, and they don't come out here. They're released in Britain, but I'm always like, oh, here's another one. Because there'll be, like, one remix I've been looking for forever, and I'm like, click, now I have it on CD. But you don't... When you watch movies like the Ennui trilogy, they're so different than anything that's being made today that, this idea, look, nobody's going to make... The reason that you can't make an Antonioni movie today is that who's going to watch it, meaning how are you going to pay for it? Like, if you make a film, like right now, you want to make any movie, you have to convince somebody to give you the money to make it. And the only way you can convince somebody to give you the money to make the film is if you're going to get a return on the investment. Well, nowadays, if I was going to try and go pitch La Ventura or La Notte, I can only imagine. I mean, there's a sketch, there's a, like, I'll be the undercover, movie guy where I just go pitch movies like Antonioni movies and watch people go, we're not going to make that. Or just submit. I mean, people have done this before, by the way. They've submitted famous movie scripts. I think somebody did this with Casablanca to studios and it got rejected. It's, just the world is a very, very different place. And I can't imagine anybody, like, as much as I love these movies, it would be very... Same with Tarkovsky movies. Like, you try and get somebody to watch Stalker. I mean, there's a good one. A movie, a film director that I like that was kind of contemporary to Antonioni, French director, but much more accessible, is Jean-Pierre Melville. So if you want to watch, I mean, whether it's Bob Le Flambeur or Army of Shadows or Le Samurai or The Red Circle, I really like Jean-Pierre Melville. Big fan. And, and watch Truffaut. Watch, like, the Antoine Doinel films, like 400 Blows and that whole series. They're different than Antonioni. But, De Sica, who made Bicycle Thieves. There's just so much stuff. But you can't go wrong. Godard's 50s and 60s output. Like Breathless. There's a lot of there's so many filmmakers. I mean, one of the movies. Let's see, where did it go? Hang on, let me see if it's. Yeah. I always talk about this on the show, but I think it's streaming. Oh my God, have I left that poster up the whole time? See, I forget. I forget. Well, there you go. I'm advertising. God, I've been looking at the camera because I had it covered by your letter. That's what happens when you're producing your own show. But you know what? In terms of a science fiction movie that's like an Antonioni movie, Aniara. I keep talking about this movie. I'm kind of obsessed by this movie. This is a Swedish science fiction movie. It is an existential film, and I was knocked out by it. I know I talk about it all the time, but I do love it. I just think that our vision of what is cinema is just changed. I'm glad that you find some value in the movies I go on and on and on about, because when I was growing up, I would see anything. I would go to the Seattle International Film Festival and I saw movies from all around the world, and I sort of taught myself, like, even if I was watching a movie that I thought was interminable or just I couldn't, like watching paint dry, I would go into a Zen state where I'm like, rather than be bored, I would be able to sort of talk myself into being able to watch the movie all the way through, and then I would find out usually that I would find something of value in it. Sometimes I didn't, but I don't think people even know how to watch movies. Like, you obviously opened up your mind and sat down and watched. I'm curious, which one did you watch first? I'd be curious. But I think a lot of audiences are going to be like, what? You know, especially today, they're going to watch something like that and go, I can't even deal. And I totally understand. But yeah, there's, I'd have to think more about movies like Antonioni movies. Another movie you need to watch, and again, it's like an Antonioni movie, and I really love this movie, and I was lucky. I don't know, I want to get the right date for this film. But it's a movie called Last Year at Marienbad. It's 1961, so it's contemporary. Alan Rene directed it, and I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but you have to watch this movie. I loved Last Year at Marienbad. I actually saw it. This girl I was dating before Elizabeth and I got together, I actually took her to the theater and showed her this, and she dug it. She actually dug it, because she sold art. But watch Last Year at Marienbad. If you guys haven't seen Last Year at Marienbad, watch Last Year at Marienbad. Watch it on the biggest. It's black and white, and watch it on the biggest screen, and get the Criterion disc, or I think Criterion disc is out of print, but it's great. And I will not loan you mine, so don't ask. But it's great, and it's again, I think you'll really, really, really like it. So yes, check that out. Check it out. Last Year at Marienbad. If you like Antonioni, it's in the similar vein of that. So, which is pretty cool. But Colin, thank you for your letter. I'm droning on. I don't even know what I'm saying. What am I saying? Ooh, okay. TJ Spillane? TJ Spillane? Greetings, Rob. Feel free to use my name. I just did. I hope I use it okay. This is my first time submitting a letter for the show, but I've been listening. Let me start this again. Let me get this again. This next letter is from TJ Spillane. I believe it's TJ Spillane. Greetings, Rob. Feel free to use my name. This is my first time submitting a letter for the show, but I've been listening since the beginning. And even before that on Collider Heroes, all the way back to the AMC days. It's funny, Collider Heroes was AMC Heroes when I started. Before I get to the topic of this letter, I just want to say thank you for all that you do and have done for the post-geek singularity community and the greater nerd sphere as a whole. I can honestly say that without you and the great John Schnepp, I would never have moved out to Los Angeles from Michigan to pursue work in production and my dreams of living out here, and I am forever grateful. Good for you, man. Congratulations. I hope it's all working out. That's amazing. Because most of the people that I know in the business, we all came from somewhere else and stuck to it. Now for the topic at hand. With the obvious success of Game of Thrones and the more recent and subtle success of shows like Outlander, The Expanse, and The Witcher, do you think studios will be quicker to dive into the deep end of the genre fiction and take bigger swings in the coming years? As with a lot of us, I'm sure, quarantine set me on a reading regimen like I haven't been on since high school. Back in June, I finally picked up The Last Werewolf on your recommendation from a ROBSERVATIONS episode last year, and frankly, I was blown away by it. For anyone unaware, first of all of the horror, I read a lot of horror. I love horror novels. The Last Werewolf, if somebody said to me, Rob, we're going to give you $65 million to make any horror movie you want, it would be The Last Werewolf. I would not hesitate. I would go make The Last Werewolf in a second. Now, as far as I know, it is still encumbered. The rights are still controlled by Scott Free, Ridley Scott's company. I have had it confirmed to me actually by somebody, one of those I would say heavy hitters that I've been conversing with. I mentioned to that person about The Last Werewolf, and they looked into the rights, and they are indeed still encumbered. So maybe it's by Scott Free. Back in June, I finally picked up The Last Werewolf on your recommendation from a ROBSERVATIONS episode from last year, and frankly was blown away by it. For anyone unaware, it's the story of Jake Marlowe, the 200-year-old werewolf who, as far as he knows, is the last of his species. Between managing his transformations every month and being constantly hunted by a worldwide paranormal organization and watching his only friend and ally in the world wither away at the hands of Father Time, Jake is just about ready to end it all himself. Until a new discovery brings rushing back a feeling he hasn't experienced in over half a century. Love. Or a century and a half. Pretty standard setup, and it's not as if there are any truly crazy twists in the story. But I found myself awestruck by how extreme it became at points. Not only is it Hellraiser-level gory, but in an almost eloquent way. It also may be the most sexually explicit thing I've ever read. I've never read any kind of erotica before, but this was like straight-up reading porn. A lot of the best horror fiction also has the best sex in it. I can definitely attest to that. Needless to say, I loved it. Where the book really shines, though, is in its world building. The device of having a centuries-old main character narrating the story through journals gives the fictional history of the world a strangely delightful, personal verisimilitude that you can only really achieve by using a narrative device like that. Bringing us back around to my main question for you, Rob, is there a way to adapt source material like The Last Werewolf for TV without it losing both its edge and what makes it most interesting, which is the way the story itself is told? I could see it maybe working as an American Psycho Dexter meets True Blood, but having read the book, do you think it could translate successfully and maintain what makes it special? Live long and prosper. P.S. I just finished the second book in the Last Werewolf trilogy, and I'm pretty sure I know now where you got Tallulah's name. Well, first of all, Tallulah was named after Elizabeth named Tallulah, but yes, I didn't tell her about that, but yes, I could see where you would get that, and she is ferocious, like she rises like Tallulah. Well, first of all, yeah, the way that I saw The Last Werewolf being done is I wanted to see it as a very elegant, I mean, you'd have to shoot it like a Ridley or Tony Scott movie, and it would have to be all of the great, elegant things. I mean, it would have to be, it's totally modern, set in Europe, totally sumptuous. It has to be totally like the coolest, high fashion, high end kind of a movie. But yes, I mean, look, I think it could absolutely be a TV series. I think the real problem here's the great frustration of life to me when it comes to adaptations. We're going to start seeing, look, as I was explaining, I don't know if I was explaining on this show, I was talking to somebody, the same person that I was talking to The Last Werewolf about. I had mentioned there's a book, when I was reading a lot of horror fiction, there was a book called Brand New Cherry Flavor by Todd Grimwood, which is, I have it right up there. Wait, oh no, I have it under his name. So I can't reach it. It would be too far away. But so it was a horror novel. I have a hardcover of it. Never in my wildest imagination would I think that somebody would have picked up Brand New Cherry Flavor to make into a movie. And Rosa Salazar, who starred in Alita Battle Angel, is supposed to play the lead in it. But people are looking into these books. So there's a ton of books. Like if I was a development executive, well, I wouldn't want to be. I would be the person that would want to green light movies because, like Ridley Scott said, you don't want to get into a development deal with your own script that you love. There's a bunch of books that what happens is somebody will read these books and they'll like them, and then you write coverage on them, and people will read the coverage. And what happens in Hollywood is because most of the people are reading the coverage and not the original material itself, the coverage, the material gets distilled down to its essence. Like you just said, let's read your description of The Last Werewolf, because let's assume for a minute that this is a piece of coverage. I'm a studio executive or I'm a producer, and I've got my development team that reads scripts, and I get coverage every day. This is what happens in Hollywood. So I read this coverage, and even if it's good coverage, and my reader has recommended it to me, I get my 2 pages. I get my synopsis, and on the other page, I get notes or recommendations or whatever. So here's what it would say. Here's what the coverage would say. The Last Werewolf. It's the story of Jake Marlowe, a 200-year-old werewolf who, as far as he knows, is the last of his species. Between managing his transformations every month, being constantly hunted by a worldwide paranormal organization, and watching his only friend and ally in the world wither away at the hands of Father Time, Jake is just about ready to end himself. That is, until a new discovery brings back a feeling he hasn't experienced in over a century and a half. Love. The problem is, like you just said, pretty standard setup. And it's not as if there are any truly crazy twists in the story. There are not. But that's the problem with all of these books. They all get read and they all get described like this, and everybody's like, I've heard that before. No, you haven't. But the only way you know why you haven't is because you'd have to read the fucking book. And the problem is nobody reads the books. They read the coverage. So you look at these things, Last Werewolf. What's Last Werewolf about? Oh, I'm not really into a werewolf story. Until you read the fucking book, and then you're like, this book should get made into a movie. Clearly somebody bought the book, but it's languished away. And it hasn't gotten made. The Last Werewolf is something I read. And then, by the way, not everybody has the same taste. So when I'm reading a book, I'm trying to read it from a producer or a filmmaker's angle and be like, oh my God, this would be so good. Like, I know, I'll give you another book. I'll give you another book that, hang on, where is it? Where did I put it? This book by Andrew Piper. This book is called Lost Girls. This book, is owned, the last I heard, was owned by Jersey Films. And there was a girl I was dating, a producer, actually, back in 2013. She was telling me that while she worked for a certain company, they were developing this book. I love this book. And the way that I see how this book should be made, basically, here's the plot of this book. Okay, here's the plot of Lost Girls. Lost Girls is about a completely amoral, coke-addicted lawyer of the Crown in Canada. He literally carries a thermos around full of cocaine. And he wins. He's completely amoral. He will win at any cost. But because he's a Crown lawyer, and you hear his inner monologue, and it's fucking great. It's right out of like Wolf of Wall Street, but he's a lawyer. And he gets tapped one day to go up to some godforsaken snowy wasteland in Canada. And where I would film this is in Winnipeg at the Winnipeg. I was in Winnipeg once in the dead of winter, and it gets so cold there that the snow doesn't stick. It's that dry snow, and you blow on it, so you've got like over the asphalt, the snow is so cold it's blowing everywhere. Anyway, so this lawyer gets tapped to go defend a teacher, a high school teacher. And 2 high school students have disappeared. And they apparently had a very improper relationship with this high school teacher. And so this lawyer, our amoral, coke-addicted lawyer, goes to Winnipeg, which is basically dark even during the day, in the middle of winter, to defend this guy. Well, this guy is not interested in helping himself or helping the lawyer defend him. Won't say a word. Won't say shit. And the lawyer starts getting embroiled in this mystery. Well, the way I saw this book when I read it, I'm like, oh my God. And I looked into finding the rights to this for a long time. And I couldn't, and then I finally found out that they were owned. And it's Michael Schamberg. They had the rights to this, and when I met this girl that actually worked on it, she was telling me that their approach to this book was very different than the way I saw it. And I saw this movie as haunting. like, and almost it's like a thriller, and this guy who's doing increasingly more and more cocaine is getting more and more paranoid as the cold is getting to him and the story is getting to him, and where are these girls and what's happened to them, and they saw it totally differently, and they saw it much more as something that was very standard, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, it's not standard, and I guess because the way I was reading it was very different than And when I was telling her how I saw the movie, she goes, well, that sounds great. You should make it that way. And I said, yes, you should. I think other Andrew Piper books, it says right on the cover, a novel of psychological terror. It is a novel of psychological terror. So, you think I would like, you think Roman Polanski wrote Rosemary's Baby or The Tenant. It's stuff like that. And is this drug-induced paranoia? Is this man being haunted? Are these girls dead? Where are they? What's going on? And I thought that was fairly obvious when I read the book. And I'm like, this would be fucking great. Like, I would love to make this movie. I read this book and I'm like, I see exactly how to make this movie. When I talked to the company that had the rights, they didn't know how to make it. They were like, their approach, they didn't like any of the scripts that came in. The approach was wrong. And I'm like, that's why these books don't get made. Either the coverage is bad, the actual people, the people that should find these books, filmmakers that love these books, should be able to like make them. I'll tell you another. There's another book series that I would love to see get made, but there's a reason why it won't get made. They're right up there. Well, I won't stand up and get them. It's a duology by Greg Bear. And the first one is called The Forge of God, and the second one is called Anvil of Stars. Now, I want to turn the second one into a TV series. It'd probably run 7 seasons. But the problem is, Phoenix Pictures, Mike Medavoy's Phoenix Pictures, has owned these books. I don't know if they still own them. They've owned these books forever. God only knows how much money they've spent developing these scripts. But so the premise of these books is The Forge of God. The Forge of God is about... There is a mysterious alien race that has sent out von Neumann machines, which are self-replicating machines, to seek out any developing intelligent civilizations that might one day rise up and threaten the galactic dominance of this intelligence. So in order to curtail that, this intelligence has sent out these self-replicating probes, and when they find a promising planet like ours, in order to nip it in the bud, they drop these machines into the core. They drop them down, and these machines bore into the core of our planet, or any planet that has a developing civilization, and it takes a year, but they basically spin down and destroy the planet. Wipe out the planet. Genocide. And they've been doing this to any species they can find for a very long time. So in The Forge of God, this is happening to the Earth. The Earth is doomed. And so another civilization, like say the United Federation of Planets, has been the good people, the good aliens, have been trying to find where these other aliens are that are blowing up planets that they think can one day rise up and destroy them. But they're always too late. They always find the planets after these machines have been dropped into the core. And so then they're left to clean up. So what they do is they try and get as many people, first of all, within a year, they try and condition and get as many people off the planet that they can save and put them on, say, a terraformed Venus and a terraformed Mars that they're cleaning up in the year that they've got. They save as much of humanity as they can, as much of our culture and anything, art, our history. They'll do anything they can, but they've only got a year to do it. And then the Earth blows up. And the end of the Forge of God, the world explodes. Done. But a bit of humanity saved. But it's the second book that I think, and it's the second book that they're trying to, I've read like 8 different versions of this script. And the problem is they always start the first 30 pages with the Forge of God and the Earth blowing up. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. You open the movie with literally the reverse shot of Contact. Instead of going from the Earth out into space, go from speed through galaxies or whatever. You end on the Earth, and you have this beautiful picture of the Earth, and you watch it come apart. That's the opening. Anyway, the second book, Anvil of Stars, is basically that these aliens, this Federation, these aliens, they hand pick a number of teenagers, various, basically high school students, and they give them a ship, the ship of the law, they call it. And it's the every civilization that's destroyed gets an opportunity to basically avenge itself. It's part of the code of the good aliens. So the good aliens take these kids, they put them on the ship, and the ship its job is to seek out in the universe and find this original alien race that's blowing up these planets, that's committing genocide. And then the second book is all about all of the teenagers on this ship and how they're training to basically also commit genocide. And it's all about what happens. It's all about the systems, the religion. The kids develop their own religion, their own system of government, and all the while they're training to do this thing. And I see it as a 7-season series. And that's just where it starts. But there's twists and turns aplenty. There's all kinds of, the society they make is so interesting. They've been trying to make this for years and years and years and years. But I'm convinced that they've never had anybody, like they'll give it to a screenwriter, but what they need is a filmmaker to come along and go, this is how you do this. And when you read the scripts have never been satisfying because the scripts never capture what's in the original material, which is always so strange to me that they never do that. So there's 3 books: Lost Girls by Andrew Piper, the Forge of God, and Anvil of Stars. I guarantee you, Anvil of Stars is one of the most interesting science fiction books you'll read, and plus the main characters are teenagers. I mean, it's not necessarily YA. It isn't. It's got some really heady topics, and the great thing about it is, it's 7 seasons. To me, I would do it as a 7-season television series, and it has a very strong beginning, middle, and an end, and the third act is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. Where it takes you is mind-blowing. So, like, these are books that I would make any one of those books. If I could produce or hopefully direct, I would do any one of those books. And they're all encumbered. They've all had many, I don't know if I've never seen a script for The Last Werewolf. I've read scripts for Lost Girls, and I've read scripts for Anvil of Stars. And it's very frustrating to read this material and be like, this has been developed to death. It's like, just go back and read the fucking book. Make the book into the movie. Why is that so hard? Or make the book into, and then they don't. What you need is a filmmaker like a Frank Darabont. How did Frank Darabont get Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption made? How did he get it made? You know how he got it made? After he made the adaptation of The Woman in the Room, he bought the rights from Stephen King for $1. And then he adapted the script himself because he knew it was a passion project. He knew exactly what, and Rob Reiner, Castle Rock, Rob Reiner's like, I'll give you $1 million to direct this movie. I mean, for me to direct it. Let it go. Darabont's like, nope, I will not. And Frank Darabont wrote and directed The Shawshank Redemption, and that's why you got what it was. That's why it was so great. That's what you need. That's what you have to have. And in Hollywood today, I can't believe I'm still talking about The Last Werewolf, but that's the problem. The problem is, with the system as it exists, the development system, you have all of these people that are not actually reading the book. They're reading the coverage, so they don't understand why a book like The Last Werewolf is different from, say, Robert McCammon's The Wolf's Hour, which is another great book. You need people that actually read these books and can make, but then again, it's hard to read because most of the time, people, you're reading drivel. You're reading screenplays. 99% of the screenplays that get written, spec, whatever, they're not worth reading. They're bad. And as a reader, like I've told you, I read over 3,000 scripts professionally. I said yes to one. I read scripts that got made, like Copycat and Face Off and stuff like that. But one script that I read that I said, this should be made. One. And that was 7. Andy Kevin Walker's 7. That was the only one. But yeah, anyway, I went off on a rant like that. See, people ask me questions like this, and I feel like, oh my God, I have to go on. You got me going. But yeah, I mean, like I have a show. When I came to LA, I had a show. I had like 500 books, 500 things that I would want to make into movies. There are very few left. Most of them have been made, to be honest. and I have very few left. And the three I just mentioned are three. The Last Werewolf, that's noob. Lost Boys, Anvil of Stars, and The Last Werewolf should all be made. And they've all, well, the Anvil of Stars and Lost Girls, they've been trying to make them forever, and nobody can lick them. What they need, and what's great is it'll happen when somebody, you've got a filmmaker and somebody has some, I mean, look, my movie didn't make, maybe it wasn't that good, you know, it didn't do well, it didn't make any money, but I feel like if it had made money, if I had an opportunity, I would have had a career where I could have made these things. I would have gone and said, here's how we have to make this. I wouldn't have had to write it myself necessarily, but I would have worked with a writer and been like, here's what I want it to be. And we don't have enough of that. There's so many great pieces of material out there that just don't, people have been trying to develop them. Look at like Speed Racer. Like, I love Speed Racer. I mean, if you think about the source material, I mean, it was a hard thing to crack. But when I was doing coverage on Speed Racer back in 1990 at Silver Pictures, and it didn't get made to what, 2008? 18 years later? Because everyone tried to make it serious. It was always like Days of Thunder. I'm like, you'd read these scripts and be like, did you guys watch the Speed Racer series? Did you see it? I mean, whether you like Speed Racer or not, and a lot of people don't, I think it's an incredible adaptation of the source material. Way better than it should be. But that's the problem. And so much of this great material is languishing away. Somebody reads a piece of coverage on The Last Werewolf and they're like, yeah, that's werewolf story, I get it. No, you don't get it. You got to read the book. Just like you said, the violence, the way the story is told, the sexuality, all of that has to be a part of it. You know, it doesn't, it's great. And when I read The Last Werewolf for the first time, there wasn't the other two books. Now it's a series. Now you got 3 books. Now it's a trilogy. Anyway, what was I saying? Totally going off. Sorry about that. Cardinal Sin is here. Dear Rob, most excellent purveyor of perverted poisons, truly the modern Caesar of corpulent celluloid, the undisputed emperor of effervescent Eloy. I bet you're a big Yvette Mimay fan. Used to be, back when we had phones plugged into the wall and had to read books and newspapers printed on paper and film criticism was reserved only by professionals. That's right, every major market had their own film critic, someone trusted by the community to go watch movies, often alone, before they were open to the public. Come back to the office and transcribe their chicken scratch notes or even just collect their thoughts. Back then, attention spans were much longer, you see, and write them down and rate them so that you'd know whether or not to waste your hard-earned dollars on the latest iteration of Charles Bronson's Death Wish or when Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry franchise had finally worn itself out and you could catch it later on late-night cable. After a few decades, a few of these professional film critics would get radio or even their own TV shows and became more respected and had sway over so many ticket dollars that the mere whim of their opinions were considered rock-solid ideas that you could take to the bank and bet your bottom dollar on, not having to spend. Then they went on to write movie books filled with columns of air quotes movie reviews. Hell, after a while, they even became award-winning satires of themselves, and thus were born, to name a few, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and Joe Bob Briggs, the drive-in movie king. Yeah, but Joe Bob Briggs' columns in the 80s were the best. Find Joe Bob Briggs' column on American Ninja. Oh my God! Never mind that he actually graduated summa cum laude from Vanderbilt University under his real name, John Bloom. By the way, he also appears in Mick Garris's The Stand miniseries, and co-wrote a true crime novel that was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize, or that he went on to lampoon regular indoor bull stuff and was the highest of the lowbrow critics for movies like I Spit on Your Grave, the first Woman's Vengeance movie. Well, you know, come on, what about They Call Her One Eye or Thriller, aka Thriller, A Cruel Picture? My God, I mean, there's another movie. I can't imagine, like, you know, a lot of social justice warrior women coming across a DVD of, Thriller, A Cruel Picture. This is the character that Daryl Hannah's based on in Kill Bill. I'm going to watch this. Love to see that girl's face when it's over. Anyway, followed up by classics like Vice Squad that he won 2 Cable Ace Awards for granting a wider audience to on his shows. Joe Bob's Drive-In Theater on the Movie Channel and the legendary Monster Vision on TNT. Those were the days when you could trust a professional movie critic that had sunk time, effort, and considerable brain power into letting you know whether or not Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS was worth your hard-earned leisure time, or whether you'd prefer 2000 Maniacs, Blood Feast, blood case, or perhaps a double feature of I Drink Your Blood, I Eat Your Skin, in which no blood is imbibed and no skin is ever eaten. I Drink Your Blood's pretty good, though. As we pass from September into October and into an entire month of horror movies to be curated by yourself and Elizabeth Gwendolyn Bell on Whining About Movies, by the way, that is correct. Elizabeth Gwendolyn Bell and I, for the entire month of October on Whining About Movies, are going to do horror films beginning Wednesday night with Don Coscarelli's original Phantasm from 1979. So join us tomorrow night for Phantasm. Let us take a moment to remember how we got here, to celebrate the auteurs from Murnau and Fritz Lang, who gave us Nosferatu and M, the classic film that gave Peter Lorre his breakout role as the serial killer of children, to Roman Polanski, Don Coscarelli, John Carpenter, and George A. Romero. Let us remember the masters of horror, not the craven play-acting wannabes like Rob Zombie, who just before the Sci-Fi Channel played the classic Carnival of Souls he was hosting, gave away the ending to the viewer audience the secret that, see, Candace Hilgoth's character is dead the whole time. What a maroon. No, let us prepare to see the Tar Man in Return of the Living Dead, Dan O'Bannon's masterpiece, truly the best zombie in any film or TV show, the scariest that will genuinely jump you out of your seat. Let us celebrate Michael Myers in a simple white Shatner mask, who, according to the book, bet you didn't know there was a book, oh yes I do, and it's very hard to get, is led by the voices in his head, which are in fact ancient bloodthirsty Celtic gods he can't stop hearing. Let us rejoice in the masterful embrace of the Spanish language Dracula, shot on the same sets as the English Todd Browning Universal film, but with an entirely different cast and crew that shot the opposite 12-hour days, and some say in low voices and whispers is better than the one with which we are familiar. And let the Ninth Gate show us how very fragile this plane is from populated by the Dark One. As we settled into the cold, stark dying of the year, let us pause and take note of the films that really cause us to shiver and scare, startle and shake. Let us embrace the wet and cold and visually stunning The Cold Out of Space, an excellent Nick Cage movie of the unspeakable, feral, and fetid end that comes to a family with the bad luck to have a meteorite of unknown origin land on their farm. I know The Satanic Rites of Dracula will be one of the great Christopher Lee Hammer films on your list. I pray you also include Frank Langella's Dracula to see which is the most reviling and which is the most compelling come-hither sex symbol. Robert Meyer Burnett, I call thee nay. I summon against thee to compel us to feel the cold concrete of the crypt, to enchant us to lose all nerve as we uncomfortably shudder to Suspiria, to ply us all to the doomed and decadent fall of the House of Usher, Pit and the Pendulum, Tales of Terror, the 1962 horror film produced by Samuel Z. Arkoff, James H. Nicholson, and Roger Corman, who also directed. This stunning screenplay was written by none other than Richard Matheson and stars masters of horror Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, and Basil Rathbone. And whilst you're at it, pull a double feature with The Last Man on Earth, the best film version of Matheson's story, I Am Legend. These terrors committed to film, I beseech and implore thee, do not fall short in sharing with us, your audience, these precious gems. And fail not to impress us with the Tombs of the Blind Dead, Return of the Evil Dead, and The Ghost Galleon by Armando de Osorio. I have all of those in a box right over there, who stand tall amongst Fulci, Bava, and Argento. Robert, you now know what you must do, or the guillotine may take your head. Fail us not this October, for our education in the dark arts is in your capable, pliant, but willing hands. Shh! Do you not hear them whisper? The dead leaves in the wind, they whisper. Interesting. Great letter. Thank you for that. I appreciate that, Cardinal Sin. Gil, nicely done. Yes, we're going to do horror films. Boy, everybody, you talk about horror movies and everybody wants to chime in. Now, we have found on Whining About Movies, like it started out, we were going to make it a very pretentious show. And I was like, Elizabeth, we're going to show people these movies, and I wanted to show Elizabeth these films, and not many people watched. When we do popular movies, more people watch. But we're going to do all horror movies in October, starting tomorrow night with Phantasm. But we're gonna mix it up. It's going to be old and new, and like the list you gave us is a good list. But I have to say, you know, I think when you're dealing with horror films, there's going to be a few things like that we're going to throw in, like Cronenberg's. There's a new transfer of Cronenberg's Shivers that came out, which Elizabeth loves, so we're going to show that. Mario Bava's Black Sunday or Mask of the Demon, we're going to show that. Yeah, we're working up a list, but we're going to publish the list on probably this weekend, so people know. I don't know what we're going to do on Friday. We're doing Phantasm tomorrow, though. A great list. And, wow, I feel like I've gone off on this show. Let's see. Brian Sutter sent in a super chat and said, "Glory to you and your house." Well, thank you, Brian Sutter. I do appreciate that. Glory to me and our house. Yes, I will say that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings from across the 28 known galaxies, remember now, you only have, well, you've got, I don't know, what, 30 hours or something to continue. You can add to the first annual Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. You can make a poster for our competition going on until tomorrow night. This one is actually by Jason Spriggs. I like this one. He told me, he had me take this picture for him. And he wanted to make it Python-esque, which I think is pretty great. I like this poster. But there's been a lot of great entries. So if you would like to enter the competition, please do so. And look forward to it. I want to thank my moderators. Joshua Levesque is here. Greg Smith is here. Robert Priso is here. How you doing, Robert? I hope everything is good with you, sir. And I want to thank them all. And, of course, you can find them and the Richard over on the Post Geek Singularity Facebook page. I thank them for all they do. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via super chats and tips and all that. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for the films they're going to make for us. I think it's going to be a fun film festival. Apparently, I have been told that the first entry into our film festival is going to be the sequel, Dieter Bastian and Patrick Keller's sequel to The Secret Exchange, The Secret Exchange 2, Broken Promises. That will be, I think, the first film that I'm going to be getting in for the Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival. You've seen the first part. The sequel will be the first. That might be the first film. I'm going to show it. I'm going to show the film, and I'm going to start putting them up. I haven't decided how to do it yet. I don't know if I should show all the movies first to everybody or wait and show them all on Christmas Day. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I think we're just going to wait. But that one I'm going to play as the inaugural film to kick off the festival. Anyway, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. And I hopefully will be back on the John Campea Show tomorrow. And we will be back with Whining About Movies, Don Coscarelli's Phantasm. And yes, Heel versus Babyface and I are back with It's Your Funeral. We're talking about The Prisoner again at noon tomorrow. So we are back in the saddle. I guess that means 4 shows tomorrow for me. I will be joining Az on his channel at noon. So go to Heel versus Babyface if you've been enjoying our Prisoner shows. Very exciting. But thanks very much. And by the way, I would The Last Werewolf by Glenn Duncan, Andrew Piper's Lost Girls, and Greg Bear's The Forge of God, and mostly Anvil of Stars. Highly recommend those if you want to read interesting books. And by the way, report back to me. If you don't think the books are that good, please tell me. I want to know. But I think all 3 of them should be developed immediately into properties. I think you should find... you need a great director. I think a David Fincher. I mean, look, I think Paul Verhoeven would have done a great job with The Last Werewolf because the violence and the eroticism, people don't know how to make erotic movies anymore. I mean, I love horror and eroticism. Everyone just goes straight to Pornhub. Well, I get it. But I want to see a film that, I mean, imagine with, by the way, no CG effects. You got to go for an American Werewolf practical effects. Get Rick Baker to come out of retirement. Anyway, that's just me. Anyway, have a better day, everybody. Thanks for being here.